Thank you for joining our founders panel. Before we get into the program, I'm just going to give a little bit more of an overview of our organization. I'm WT, Muslim Women in Technology. Who are we? What do we do? So our mission is to empower Muslim women and other underrepresented groups through a few ways. So one of the biggest ways is through networking. We have over 550 active members. You too can be a member. You just make an account on our website. It's like less than 10 seconds to get that done. We have a lot of events surrounding networking. We've had chai chats before. We've had game nights. Outside of that, we help with recruitment. So we have events with other companies who are hiring. We are working on trying to create a pipeline through those companies to increase hiring from our group, which is like Muslim women or other groups that we work with. And then we are working right now also on building a more formal mentorship program. So you'll hear more about that soon. So if you're interested in being a mentor, being a mentee, whether you're in a senior leadership position or if you're still a student in college, feel free, you can sign up for that very soon. If you look at our past events on our website, you'll see we've had tech talks about things like data science. We've had like 4 data scientists from companies ranging from Google to McDonald's. And if you are working at a company that is hiring, or if you work for a nonprofit organization focused at underrepresented groups in tech and are interested in partnering with us, feel free to reach out. There's a link right here, solo.to/Muslim Women in Tech. We are on literally every social media. And lastly, we are expanding our team. So we have a lot of open positions. So if you want to volunteer your time to help other women excel in the space, feel free to sign up. Again, if you go to that link, you will find a way to sign up for those roles. And I'll be turning it over to Safa then to get into the panel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zara, for that. The moment we're all been waiting for. Super excited to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Zari Zahra. Zari is a Pakistani-American Harvard MBA. She's an experienced product manager and a builder of web and mobile apps for Pandora, SquareTrade, Realty Shares, and Rakuten. Today, she's the Chief Product and Technology Officer and co-founder of Spekit, the leading Salesforce adoption and contextual learning platform for growing organizations. She oversees all of product and engineering departments, including a team office located in Karachi, Pakistan. In her free time, Zari spends time listening to audiobooks and spending time with her mini golden doodle Rumi and her family. Awesome. And our next panelist is Asma, Mirza. Asma is the founder and CEO of Steradian Technologies, based out in Houston, a biotech startup that is bridging the gap in healthcare and accessibility by developing high-tech medical devices that cost the price of a latte. Asma received her graduate degree in global health and human rights from Duke University and has a passion for reinventing, creating, and developing innovative ideas into reality. She has led large projects globally in the Caribbean, Middle East, and South Asia. She was the original founder of Pheramore Inc., a genetics tech startup, where she served as its CEO before transitioning into Steradian to pursue her passion of medicine, deep tech, and global health. Asma also recently received the Patrice Johnson Award and was honored the highest distinction in civic leadership in Houston. She's a fellow of Leadership Houston class and the founder of PAM Mosaic Houston, a nonprofit arts collective highlighting artists of color and their work. And last but not least, our final panelist is Aziza Ismail. Aziza is a social impact-driven entrepreneur who founded LiteraSeed after a personal tragedy in her family. She's developed a visual-based communication platform that helps bridge the communication gap between patients and providers. The software helps low and mixed literacy patients describe their symptoms and health condition using pictures for easy, simple communication. Aziza is a self-taught software engineer who bootstrapped LiteraSeed over several years. Recently, LiteraSeed launched a pilot study with Valley Wise Health, the largest safety net healthcare in Arizona. Great. With that being said, we'll start the panelist discussion. Feel free, everyone, to chime in the chat if you have any questions. We'll be sure to answer it at the end. So to get us started here, I want to start off by asking the panelists their motivation behind starting their companies and what passion led to that specifically. So I don't know, Aziza, Zari, or Asma, one of you can start first, but was there something specifically that drew you to start your company? Was it a passion for technical analysis or a specific industry?
Yes, I'd be happy to go first. I again, I was motivated by a personal tragedy with my family. So I come from, of course, like many of you, an immigrant background. My parents originally came from Afghanistan, speak very, a little bit of English, or struggle with language, I should say, and low literacy, and just kind of on the day-to-day, I see their regular struggles with navigating day-to-day life. And that was kind of the original thought behind that. I knew that I wanted to build something that could help people improve their quality of life and overcome these barriers. In 2016, a 10-year-old cousin of mine ended up in the emergency department with a life-threatening condition. Because of a communication barrier, she ended up losing her life while waiting to see a doctor. After her death, I ended up, talking to other doctors and talking to nurses and listening to other people's stories. And I found out that this is a much bigger problem in the US. So it's like 80 to 200,000 people every year die as a result of medical errors. And 79% of medical errors are rooted in communication gaps. And that's what got me started. Like I said, I spoke with doctors and we started to build this product, this visual-based communication tool. And now we're piloting it at the Valley Wise Health, which is one of the largest safety net health systems in the state of Arizona. Yeah, so that was my motivation. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know,
Can I
Zari,
just say that was incredibly powerful,
yeah.
And just an incredibly hard motivation to follow up on. So Aziza, like seriously, hats off. Like I recently lost my brother, and it takes a lot to come out of that and turn that into something that's actually going to be useful for other people. So that's amazing. Sorry, digesting that, but my motivation was basically through my own experience. The idea of Spekit came about. So Spekit is a digital enablement platform. I think I mentioned that. The idea came about while me and Melanie, my co-founder, we were working together at a really fast-growing Series C startup in San Francisco. And we basically had thrown a bunch of money at the problem of getting people to use the technology that was supposed to be helping them be more productive, without tons of results. And we were always struggling with that particular conundrum because the information they needed was out there somewhere where they weren't using it, weren't seeing it, weren't accessing it. And we really saw the opportunity to make it contextual and make it hyper intelligent and hyper relevant to, say, like, a Salesforce or an Outreach or all the different tools that lie in a company's employee stack. Because imagine when you're first an employee, when you first join any company, the number of tools, the sheer number of processes, the increasing rate of change in the modern workplace can be a really exhausting and overwhelming experience, not just for new employees, but also for the typical employee. Sort of sucks the joy out of learning and growing, and makes it an obstacle that you have to overcome to then do your job, which is like not how I think most humans were wired. Like, when you're young, I truly believe
recording in progress.
People do enjoy like learning, and that's sort of like how, and part of the inspiration there was, how can we bring that back into the workplace and make that part of the routine that you go through as an employee. And so yeah, that was me. And now
yeah, I can go next. So to be completely honest, there wasn't a moment that I had that kind of catapulted me into doing what I was doing. In grad school, though, I was studying global health, and something that I had just seen across the board was when we were deploying technologies to the global south, they would always be the cheapest version and the easiest version, whereas when we looked at deep technologies and high technologies, they would be reserved for very specific countries. And I remember just thinking, there has to be a way to take really high tech and technology that's just as accurate and as sensitive and be able to make it, at a fraction of the cost and be able to deploy it worldwide. And that was just a thought that occurred in grad school. But there was no moment that catapulted me into this. I ended up going to, I'm from Houston, Texas, so we have the Houston Medical Center here, but I ended up going to an accelerator night. Just, it was an open night, everybody came and everybody was pitching themselves instead of an idea. And I was watching all of these people pitch themselves and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then somebody just came up to me and they were like, are you on the pitch line? And I was like, no, I'm just here to watch. And they were like, you should pitch. And I was like, I like was not prepared for this. And I just went up and pitched because honestly, every single person that pitched was white. And I was like, I'm just going to take one for the team. And I went up, I pitched, and I actually got chosen for the accelerator. And that's where my first startup, which was a genetics tech startup, came out of. And what I'm doing now is my second startup. So I used my first startup as kind of everything you shouldn't do. And I apply that to what we're doing now. And this honestly was very serendipitous too. I met my co-founders from one of my former investors, and they happened to be doing something that I was really passionate about. And we kind of used a technology they had been working on for the past 5 years and completely turned it into what we're doing today, which is a 30-second high technology photonic test that can detect any respiratory disease very quickly, and it's about $5. So yeah, I think sometimes it's awesome to have these moments that really send you forward in your passion, but not all of us have those. And I think you don't necessarily need to have that as long as you know that you want to innovate and invent. I think that's the moment where you realize there's something for you to do there.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Asma. You talked about failure, and I actually wanted to talk about that as well. A lot of people have ideas, but they're scared of, I think my idea won't work, or I don't know if there's a product market fit. Do you guys as founders and CEOs have a success criteria that you measure your idea off of, or is there any guardrails that you could prescribe to someone who's starting off in the startup world to make sure that they're on the right path? I don't know, Asma or Zari or Aziza, if you have any thoughts there.
I think it's gonna, like, between the three of us, I think it's gonna vary significantly based on what you're doing, who your target market, quote unquote, is, and what you're trying to achieve. But if you really like boil it down to the very essence of it, is someone using it, or is someone buying it, right? Like, is someone buying it and is someone using it? In B2B SaaS, you buy and you use. In something like LiteraSeed, might be you use and then you actually gain insights. So what it would like it would basically be one of those two. Do you have enough people who are willing to use your product, give you their time, their energy, whatever that is? I think there's that varies, but I think it's hard in the beginning to know if what the people that you've attracted are flukes. Like, we've been able to convince like X amount of people. Do we know we have a product fit? But I think you start when it started clicking for me personally was when I well, obviously revenue goals, targets, but I think more than that, when people started actually responding to the product and saying things like, oh, I didn't realize I needed it, right? Or I didn't think that I could work this way. So I thought that was an interesting turning point for us when we got to that level of maturity. But honestly, I don't know if that answered your question. It is a really hard question. It's $1 billion question. I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
I think so with us, with LiteraSeed, we're in the healthcare space, and so right now we're focusing a lot on research and development, gathering, building product, gathering evidence that the technology works, it improves clinical outcomes. That's something that's going to take a few years to be able to build and prove it out. So first, the commercialization of it, as far as will someone pay for it, that question is like maybe still at least a few months down the road. We're focused right now. We're seeing that obviously patients, do the patients want to use it? Do they feel that there's a value to using the product? It's helping them communicate their symptoms. And is it something that the provider finds useful and helpful? So we're kind of looking at the success of the product. right now as far as like the usage and potential impact, and we're already seeing some positive results in the clinic right now. I hope that's answering the question. I'm not sure, but I think for healthcare, it's a little bit more longer term, a little bit harder to say too soon.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing because we are in biotech and healthcare. So I think it depends what you're looking at, right? If you are, excuse me, if you're looking at strictly social impact versus, I'm like choking, guys, hold on. If you're looking at strictly social impact versus investors who are going to wonder, okay, what's the return on this going to be? Your slide deck, your story, everything is going to be completely different. If you're going to investors, you have to show them essentially how they can make 10 times the return of what they're putting in, right? So now you have to have these charts, you have to have all this stuff. You prove that out by exactly what Zari was saying, where you show, I have customers who want to pay for this. And that's similar in healthcare too, but with healthcare, if you have a test or if you're doing something that deals with somebody's health and HIPAA, you have to be able to show the efficacy of it. And to be able to do that, oftentimes you need clinical trials, you need data, you need partners that can back you up. And a lot of times you need funding to be able to do that. So I think the healthcare route is a lot longer than something that's more consumer based. And then if there's something like social impact, I think it's a completely different story you're going to tell there, right? You're going to talk about how what you're going to do is going to eventually change the world. So I think it just depends on what you're looking at. That's going to be your measure of success.
Yeah, I think those are great points, that it varies by industry, and also, like you mentioned, Asma, if it's social impact, if it's a pure SaaS business, like Zari also mentioned as well. On that topic, one popular question that often gets asked to entrepreneurs is finding the right co-founder or being a solo founder. So I wanted to ask each of you how you chose that path. Is there, a benefit to having a co-founder, or for some people being a solo founder is more beneficial? And oftentimes you hear a lot of clashing between co-founders too. So if you do have a co-founder, if you could explain maybe what type of chemistry you need for that to work, for example. I don't know, Zari, if you'd like to start with that, because I know you mentioned you co-founded Spekit with Mel.
Of course. I'm obsessed with Mel. We're basically we are one of those co-founders that are like this, and truly like have a great dynamic. And it's not because we used to work together, because we didn't work that closely together. I think Mel's just been, I can't imagine doing this alone. And I am so in awe of people who do this on their own, not just because of the sheer amount and volume of work and the intensity of it, but more so because I feel like for me, Mel's just been a great, like, both gut check on so many big calls that we've made, but also like a really great support system and radar. Because a lot of times, especially when you're early on, before you have like other employees or big investors with lots of experience, there's no one who's going to mirror you or like, give you real-time feedback on whether your decisions are working, like whether what you're doing is actually having the right impact, or if you're thinking about it the right way. So it's hard, and the emotional toll of it, right? Most of the times, like, well, Mel basically was living out of her grandma's house. I had downgraded to a studio. So when you're really, really early, you're making all these big compromises on your life in order for your startup to survive. And so I just feel like it's a very like emotionally tense time, and I couldn't have done it without Mel. And then even now, like honestly, it's just now and then as you scale, we're hiring these amazing functional leaders that frankly are just phenomenal and have way more experience than we do in their own areas, which is obviously what we want for our company. But at the same time, there's only so many of those that you can manage, and only so much, actual coverage that you can give. And so being able to have good synergy with someone who has the same underlying values, I think that's super important to us. Our employees are super important to us. Our customers are super important to us. We have like that core true north. It's just been phenomenal. But I will say we dated before we got married. Like we tried it out for a while after Mel pitched me the idea. And then We also had a founder agreement, which honestly, she reads once in a while just to like laugh at it, but we've pretty much stuck to that because we have like very clearly divided roles. So I think that's helped. That's helped us get to where we are. It is like not too much overlap, but a shared underlying value set. Anyway, I could speak about Mel for an hour. You guys need to cut me off. But yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned that having a co-founder is like marriage. I was watching a Y Combinator talk and they mentioned something very similar, that the values and the chemistry is fundamental to having a successful business. So that's so interesting.
100%. Yeah, it's like one of the most important relationships in my life. I would say on par with a sibling or a parent, like that level of intensity. Definitely, at least in my experience. So I'm sure I know there's different experiences. So I'd be curious to hear how other people think about this.
Yeah, so my current co-founders, I have two. So it's three of us who founded the company. My current co-founders, we're an intergenerational family or company, but right, family, because that's how close we are. But my co-founders both have been in their space for about 50 years. So they are experts at what they do. They're on the technical and product side. And I think when we first started, they're both white men. So when we first started, it was a little bit of me pushing back a lot, because imagine you have worked in corporate your whole life, and now you have somebody who's significantly younger than you, a woman, a person of color, kind of calling a lot of the shots. And there was always a level of respect. So for me, it was not about questioning their intentions. It was about just showing them like, okay, this is kind of the boundary that I'm setting, and this is a standard you have to rise to. And we've been working for the past 3 years seamlessly. And they're very technical in what they do. And I'm more of the visionary of how we're going to be able to execute something. And it really helps to have that balance where somebody who is so detail oriented is like, we actually can't do this product that you've like come up with in your brain. It's not going to have the results that you want. And I think your co-founder, like Zari said, like they really do check you. Like when you're in meetings, you come off of certain meetings, especially with investors, and you're like, was that a good meeting or was that a bad meeting? And like having somebody else there who watched the whole thing really helps. And the reason I say this is because in my first company, I had a co-founder, and that was actually why I left the company, because my co-founder was extremely emotionally abusive, and she would do things that were just like legally not allowed to be done, but it was all happening under my watch as the CEO. And to have that type of liability from your own co-founder is very, very difficult to explain to investors. I had to explain to them once why we had genetic data on our servers, why she broke into it to be able to look at, who she could date, because it was a dating app. So it's things like that that I think people don't talk about in the tech space, right? Like we're all supposed to be having a certain type of shield. We're all supposed to be able to carry the weight of it, but working with somebody day in and day out, like you better make sure that that person has the same values as you, of honesty, of sincerity. You're looking at budgets together, you're looking at contracts together. So those things are very, very important, because otherwise your mental health is going to tank, and you can't run a company, you can't produce good things and be happy about it if you're just mentally exhausted. So yeah, you need to date your co-founder. If you've worked with them before, that's amazing. If you've been friends with them before, I think that's great. Just set some boundaries. But I really like having people from different backgrounds be my co-founders, because it balances the team out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Asma.
I guess then now it's I'll get started with mine. I actually started off as a solo founder initially for a few years. I struggled a lot during those first few years that I was working on this, and I knew in my mind that I wanted to have a co-founder. And I think one of the first things that I ended up doing was I wrote down what to me would be like an ideal co-founder. And I knew the importance of having the right co-founder to begin with. And so I actually had some trial and error a few times I almost thought I was going to start a company with someone, and then it kind of would fall through. And I realized that, and I agree with what Asma and Zari have been saying about sharing the same values, and also just the fact that starting a company is something that is can be emotionally taxing and difficult. I would say with my current co-founder, I got very lucky. And I think that just kind of continuing to persist and trying to work on starting a company and networking and joining events and going through different programs. And eventually, I knew what I was looking for. And when I met someone who had the similar kind of shared values and same, or I should say shared vision, I think mostly good character. It was someone I saw who I knew that, being a co-founder is an important role for the future of the company, kind of not just the direction the company would go in, but also would influence and impact who else comes on board and kind of just the culture and everything. So I kind of looked more at the I think I would say, yeah, shared vision, emotionally intelligent, someone who can help me through really difficult times. I've had times where I had a phone call actually once with our clinical partner, and it felt to me on that call that they were about to just they were pulling out of a grant we were applying for, and we were right at a deadline. And I just thought it was the end of the world because I felt like that was going to destroy everything for LiteraSeed and all of our efforts. And I got on the phone with my co-founder, and he kind of laughed, and he was like, we spun it around pretty quickly. So don't remember exactly what he had said, but I know that I went from being devastated in just a moment to suddenly we got back on track, and we submitted a grant without the clinical partner. And so I don't know, I guess that's what I would say is definitely, it's really hard to be a solo founder, but it's also not good to pick the wrong co-founder either, because that could really hurt your startup. So for me, I knew on the back of my head what I was looking for, and just continued to persist and kept not compromising on that. And at some point, I guess I got lucky, and I've got an amazing co-founder, and we're seeing the benefit of, ever since he's joined, things have been really propelling forward pretty significantly in the past 3 months that he's been with us. I recently we've got 3 or 4 pilots in the pipeline. I had a local news story coverage about our work. I got nominated for like Healthcare Heroes Award and stuff. So I don't know. I just kind of knew that once we had the right co-founder, things really started moving forward much faster. And I don't know, I guess I'm just really lucky. Got lucky somehow. But
yeah, that's great to hear all of your experiences. I know it's hard to paint it black and white because each experience is so different, but it is extremely important to find the right person to work on a business with. On that topic of conflict, I think a lot of people think conflict's really bad, but in some cases it's healthy for your business too. Asma, I know you mentioned that you had a past experience in your previous startups. I wanted to ask you, is there a strategy we can take away from, engaging in conflict in a way where it's meaningful or productive, or it leads to something better? Or I guess, what are your strategies in engaging in conflict, whether it's at the leadership level or with a co-founder?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in my current company, we have a lead scientist who kind of runs all of the things that are happening in the lab. And she works really closely with our head of product. And there's always a little bit of miscommunication. So what we generally do is somebody will come and tell me, or they'll tell somebody else. And then you hear all these little whispers. So what we end up doing is we'll just have a team call, and we'll be like, just say what you have to say. Everybody just talk about it, because at the end of the day, you're still here. And if you truly believe everybody's intentions are correct, then there's a way to solve this. And we've had, about 3 of those open discussions, and I've seen their relationship grow to something of just utter transparency and understanding. So there were some boundaries that were sometimes being crossed. Sometimes work was being put on somebody that shouldn't be put there. And sometimes people just don't know how to verbalize and articulate that. And it just gets pent up inside of you. And then you're just really unhappy. And anytime somebody does something, it just triggers you more. So we just have these open discussions, and they're open at any time. Like anyone in the company is, able to email me, and I've told them, like, don't go to anybody else. I will be your point person. Email me, and we'll set somebody up with the relevant parties and sort this out, because I don't think anything is unsolvable unless you're just a horrible human being and have really bad character, which I don't believe anyone at my company does. So I think there's a lot of different ways to solve conflict. This is just one of the ways that we've done it.
Yeah, that's a great point. On that topic, I know a lot of people are interested into getting to entrepreneurship. I think a big question people ask is, do I need to have a specific skill set? Do I need to have an MBA? Should I come from an engineering background? I know all of you come from very different backgrounds too. I don't know, Zari, if you want to kick off that conversation, but are there prerequisites to being an entrepreneur? Are there things that you found particularly successful when you were starting out? I know you also had gotten your MBA and you had experience being a product manager too, so I'm sure that helped as well.
Depends. Again, I think it would depend incredibly. It would vary significantly based on the field that you're in and the discipline that you're in. There is everything from high school dropout all the way to 50 years of experience when it comes to co-founders. And really, if you are going into something that is, say, a deep tech play or a healthcare play where you do need someone who is a specialist in that technology, it's going to be hard to find that straight out of high school or straight out of college, right? Versus like B2B SaaS or a lot of consumer SaaS. B2B SaaS, for example, where would you even think about those problems if you hadn't actually worked somewhere? So I would definitely say work experience trumps the MBA. Sorry, MBA. But MBA was super helpful for other reasons. But I do think that in terms of the being an entrepreneur, I think the most helpful thing has been just experience and working at other startups. I think that is really what propelled me personally into that, because you get the taste of being an entrepreneur without the risk of being an entrepreneur if you work for a smaller company. So if you're curious, which I was always trying to downsize into a smaller company consistently throughout my career with varied success. But that actually really gave me a really good idea of what I needed. What do we need in terms of skill set? I don't know. Outside of like technical requirements that are domain specific, I will say I'm not an engineer. So I am a product person who found engineers, are founding engineers. They're phenomenal, and built a product with them. So depends. Now, could I have done that if I was in like, I don't know, a deep tech play? Maybe not. But again, so it sort of varies in terms of what you need. You do need someone handling the building and then the selling. I do think that those are two things that absolutely need to be done. And then there has to be a shared vision between the two. And that's kind of how we sort of split things up in terms of Spekit. Yeah, I don't know if that helped, but
yeah, no, that helped a lot. And then Aziza and Asma, I know also you have different backgrounds too. So how did you find your background help inform your startup? I know both of you are in the health tech space as well.
So for me, I didn't have specific educational or academic or professional training before going into the healthcare space. And so for me, it started off with something that I was passionate about, and I was just determined, and I entered into this healthcare space. And at first it was very difficult. I, walked into the office of a doctor and I pitched her my project. And I remember for at least a year, 2 years, when I would talk to these medical doctors or anyone within the healthcare system, it was like they spoke a different language. And as much as I tried to communicate, I was kind of like, I'm not understanding what they're saying. So just continuing to persist and being determined and not giving up. And, at some point, I don't know, you kind of learn the language, you learn how to navigate it all. But I think mostly I would say that I don't think there's specific academic or professional training that requires you to starting a company. As long as you're really passionate about what you're doing, you're determined. There are a lot of tools online that are available to you for learning any specific skill sets that you might need. But I think Zari mentioned this, being able to inspire and motivate people to come join you who have those other skill sets. So I hope that answers the question. I think I did. If not, feel free to ask again.
No, that's a great point. Is also, I don't think people realize the people leader aspect. I know a lot of co-founders and CEOs are the ones who set the culture and the framework for the company. So I think that's super important that you mentioned that. Great. Pivoting into our last question here before Q&A, I think that there's no secret that, there are a lot of challenges that minorities go through in starting a company. There's limited resources. Sometimes funding is not available as readily either. So I want to talk about your experience as a woman founder, as a person of color, as a Muslim. How did you go about dealing those challenges? Did you have a mentor, someone to guide you in the process? And are there any, words of wisdom that we can take away for people who are interested in starting their own company, but they're scared of, being the first one or the only one in their cohort to pursue such a thing? We can start with Asma first, if that works.
Sure. I don't think I could do this without my faith. I think if you go into entrepreneurship, regardless of your skill set, one thing that you need to be is pathologically optimistic. It's like a problem, but it's a good problem to have. And for me, I can't do that unless I know that there is a higher being that is in complete control of everything, right? Because when you think of going and pitching to somebody, when you think of funding, when you think of who you're going to hire next, all of those things, like, just to be real, when I think of those in my mind, I'm like, how am I going to do that when I'm competing against people who are being promulgated because of nepotism, or people who have the in, or like their dad works in investment banking? Like, how do I do that? And then I think to the fact that if Allah could say 2 words or 2 sentences and the entire world, the entire universe existed, what is my funding? It's absolutely nothing for him. And so for me, that's what it is. And for the first couple of years, we bootstrapped everything. My co-founders took stuff out of their retirement funds. I used all my savings. We really did the startup thing. But for me, it wasn't about doing the grind or like getting like, we're making it hard for ourselves. For me, it was like, this is our situation. This is going to be a testament of my faith if I truly believe that Allah is going to open doors. And, subhanAllah, little by little, he did. And we got grant funding coming in, we got people coming onto the team. And there are times where when things feel like they're going too good, I think sometimes as Muslims, we're like, wait, this is too much of a favor that you're doing for me. Like, when is the other shoe going to drop? And I think that's just shaitan that like comes to you. And so for all of it, whether it's investors who are racist, which I'm sure all of us have dealt with, people who don't say the right things, or just coming out of a meeting knowing that it just went horribly, to just feeling like the door is closed on you, and you're like scrambling to figure out how you're going to get everybody's salaries paid and how you're going to continue your research. Truly, for me, that's like, I shouldn't even worry about that, because that worry is shaitan. I know Allah can take care of it. So let me just like keep doing what I can do and move forward. And if it's not meant to be, then that's the path that Allah wrote in my qadr. Like, that's okay. And I think, like I said, I couldn't do this unless I had my faith. I think I'd just be like, I'm out, like, I'm done.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know there's motivations for all that, and faith is a big part of that. So appreciate you sharing that. Aziza or Zari, any thoughts?
I think I agree. I think 100% with Asma. I ended up bootstrapping LiteraSeed for a long time, until it came a point where people wanted to start funding us because of what we've been able to achieve while we were bootstrapped. So I also kind of, anytime that I've kind of struggled with finances and I kind of came to close to having zero, nothing, something always happens. So it's also for me the faith is an important part. I feel like Allah takes care of us. So I mean, last minute, someone has an offer from somewhere. We raised some funding through the WeFunder platform, and you know, whatever opportunity kind of comes up, it's always kind of, we just recently got the NSF award. I mean, while I would say just recently, we were about to go to zero in our bank account, and then we got an investment offer and we got a National Science Foundation grant. So as long as you persist and you persevere, and you don't let not having, you kind of, what's the other term for just, I guess, being scrappy is also like finding ways of doing things without spending a whole lot of money either, has helped a lot.
When you say minority, I'm just like, I wonder which one, because, I'm a woman of color who's an immigrant. And so there's like the layers of it. I'm a woman of color who's an immigrant, who's a Muslim. So there's some layering going on there. Yeah, but my baseline, the biggest minority I belong to already, at the, as a starting point, gets maybe 2% of all the venture capital funding out there. So that's the largest minority group that I belong to, and that just says a lot about how the odds are, actually stacked against you, because the odds are always stacked against you when you have a startup or an idea or whatever that is. But then there's like the multiplier effect. And 100%, like whether you call it faith in a religion or whatever, or your spiritual beliefs, or your faith in your idea or the people that you're working with, you need something really strong to hold on to. For Mel, definitely, it was a lot of faith and spirituality as well. And for me, it was a mix of that, plus also faith in the people around me, that it's not just about me, and necessarily it's about the team that's working on this together. And just I feel like that creates sort of like a self-fulfilling propelling motion when there's multiple people who are with you and who have that blinders on vision of the world as it could be versus as it is. And you need someone else who believes in it, so that, because ultimately there'll be good and bad days. But in terms of being a minority, I don't know, like, I know that the discrimination definitely happens. Some of the advice that we got, I think, earlier on when we were fundraising for our earlier rounds, around how we should pitch, how we should appear, how we should, present ourselves, a little bit more of the chest pounding, at the stereotype that is that you would see on Silicon Valley or something like that. That sort of advice will come your way, but so you can either like play into it and try to conform, or you can own up to who you are and really just unashamedly, shout it from the rooftops. And I tell Mel this all the time. If like this is the one situation in our lives where being a woman might be an advantage, if this is at one time, or being a minority might be an advantage, or whatever that is, I mean, I am not going to apologize for taking that one opportunity, because the odds were already stacked against us to start with, so many times. And I feel like as women in particular, as minorities, as other people, there is that need to be like, oh, I want to be there because of my own, my merit. And absolutely, you can't get anywhere without merit. Absolutely. That's especially not in business. But just like any other good like founder would do, you take the cards you're dealt, and these are some of the cards. And so, I mean, we lean in, and Mel used to be a little bit hesitant about leaning into us being two female co-founders, for example. But she's come a long way, because she realizes, one, it inspires people. Two, to her point, like it's actually our story, right? It literally is actually our story, and people care about the humans behind the startup. Again, a startup is a set of humans trying to do something. So that's myth number one. Actually, someone brought that up earlier, and I'm so glad they did. I think it was you, Asma. It's all about people, right? That's just the truth of it. So I do think, yeah, I think you can either like, shy away from it, or just own up to it and lean into it, because what have you got to lose? You've already got these odds stacked against you. You might as well. You might as well. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents.
Reminds me of your podcast where you said just take the shot, because if you don't, you're gonna miss it either way. So
Exactly. Yeah. I think that that's the biggest lesson I would like anyone here today. If you're scared, don't be scared of asking. And one of my advisors, she gave us this advice. We used to be scared of posting too much on LinkedIn earlier on, or on social, etc., worried about our image. She's like, you guys don't have an image, so just like post, just take the shot. And I think like that's another thing with fear of failure, the fear of being judged, that just like, don't let that be. And I credit Mel. This is why I love her, for actually encouraging that in me. And that's one of the big benefits of having a co-founder who had different life experiences, right? And so she could help me on that journey as well. But yeah, take the shot, because like don't be apologetic. Ask anyone and everyone who you can for help. Why not?
yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was very empowering. Great. I know we have 10 minutes left, so just going to pass it over to Zahra out there, co-founder of Muslim Women Technology, to handle Q&A.
All right, it seems like we have a few questions in. You guys feel free to keep posting some in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. One question by Madiha that I thought was interesting, we can start off with, is what part of your company excites you the most? Maybe we can go starting from Zari to Asma to Aziza.
What part, as in like what part of my company excites me the most? Ooh, the humans, or the product, or the vision, or the customers? It's hard. You can't like, which one, who's my favorite child? I don't know. All of them. But I think definitely, I think the culture, because I do think that everything, if you double click, starts from there. I think our culture is really inclusive, really open, very similar to what Asma said. We talk it out. Like, it's a talk it out culture. So if you like talking it out, come join Spekit. We are hiring, by the way. So yeah, I think that's my favorite thing in Spekit.
For us, and for me personally, it's the fact that we are constantly like inventing. We're like actually in the lab, trial and error, and like there was a moment where when we took our entire product that we made, it has like these high tech like optics in it, and we had a sample of COVID-19 in there, and we were radiating it with lasers, and that's when we realized like, oh my God, this thing works. Like this thing could like save so many lives. And COVID is just the start. Like now we're working with Johnson & Johnson's lung cancer initiative to do early stage lung cancer. So for me, it's like, not only is it the technology that excites me, but it's like when you are building something, like quite literally, like with your hands, when you're building something with people who understand what you want to do as the end goal, it's just fun. It doesn't like, Mondays are my favorite days. Like Mondays are fun for me because I'm like, I get to go in and like create something. And yeah, there's like a lot of operations you do as a CEO, but like, whatever, those like are offset by all of the creativity that we do.
I think we all gasped when she said Monday's her favorite day, right? It's not just me.
For me, I would say this is definitely, it's a hard question to answer, but if I had to pick just one thing, I would say that the vision. I think I'm often thinking 5 to 10 years down the line, I'm seeing in my mind what wild success looks like with LiteraSeed and the impact, the social impact that we're hoping to achieve with that. And so that's the sort of vision in my mind every time when things are going hard, or even when they're not going hard, I'm seeing that, and that's what motivates me and that's what excites me.
Awesome. So there's two questions that are kind of like, they're both relevant and a bit similar. I'm gonna start off with the first one, and it's about, oh, sorry, I'm scrolling too much. So the first thing is about, okay. So entrepreneurship, grit, and initiative are learned behavior. Can you trace back your successes or upbringing or childhood experiences to anything? And then there's also a question about what core experiences growing up do you feel like played a role in how you got to where you are today, or if they've been integral to your success. And then a follow-up to that two people asked were about opportunity costs. So there's a question about how are you able to position yourself to take in the financial risk going in? I think something else a lot of you talked about is having faith, and kind of like about how a lot of things are stacked against you, but like maybe a little bit about your risk appetite. And in addition to, sorry, I think let's break this down. Let's start off with the background question, and then we'll go into the next one. So any childhood experiences or life experiences that led you to your current successes? Aziza, can we start with you?
Sure. I think for me, I'm a first generation high school and college graduate. My mom's illiterate. She can't read or write. Kind of going through those experiences growing up. And also I remember I'm very observant, but I also think I'm a little sensitive to what things that I observe. So just seeing just the day-to-day struggle, I remember asking my dad about people who were homeless and saying, why is this the case? Why are people, why is this a situation for some people? And I remember hearing back in return, oftentimes just, it is what it is. That's life. Some people are less better off. And so those kinds of experiences, I think, were the original sort of like what led me down the path I am on today. It's just seeing that and kind of being like, no, it shouldn't be this way. I think there is a way, as long as to improve it, as long as we're determined and we want to. I believe that we're able to. And so that was, I would say, I guess, going back in my childhood, those are the kinds of experiences that shaped me going into entrepreneurship today. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Zari, do you want to take it away next?
Oof, I'm really not sure. This is a great question that I haven't had a lot of time to think about. I do think I always liked building things. I think that was fun for me. So similar to what Asma said, I like tinkering. I like IKEA, you guys. I have a problem. Like I like physically putting things together as well. So something about the blank slate creativity appeals to me, and I think it always did since I was a kid. So maybe a little bit of that and a desire for that. And then I think, yeah, I think that was the primary one, I would say, in terms of what really compelled me that I can think of. I'm sure my mom would know.
Zari, I have a dresser sitting here from IKEA that has not been put together. If you want to take a trip from Pakistan to Chicago, feel free.
On my way back, just
yeah.
drop in.
Asma, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this question?
Yeah, sure. Again, like, this is one of those things that I can't really pinpoint, but I do know, kind of like Aziza said, I think I've always had a very sensitive empathy towards people, and sometimes it's too much, and you try to find solutions for it. And when people think of what stuff is going to be like 10 years down the road, or what is the legacy that you're going to leave, I always think, like, I don't really care to leave a legacy as long as whatever work I'm doing even affects one person. That's good enough for me. Like, great. And so I think just growing up with that idea of failure is okay, risks are hard, but as long as you have a support system, you'll be okay. And for me, my support system has always been my friends and family, a lot of who have joined on here. And I think that's why I was even able to take these risks, because for me, even starting Steradian, it was not how big can we get, what's our IPO going to look like, how much money are we going to raise. For us, it was like, if we can build something really cool and it'll affect one person's life and it'll lessen their chance of mortality from something, that's a good life, man. Like, I'm okay with that. And if we end up making $1 billion on the way there, then great. But I think sometimes it's just, you take the creativity and you take the empathy and you put it together, and that's enough to kind of push you forward to take these risks.
Yeah, I think that was a perfect transition into the next part of the question, which is about opportunity costs and risks. So just to like reiterate the question real quick. So the question was, one thing many folks thinking about founding a startup think about are trade-offs and opportunity costs. Can you all talk about these and navigating those thoughts? Is it something you revisit? So Asma touched on it a bit. If anyone else wants to add more to it, feel free.
I think the biggest opportunity cost is in terms of time. I feel like that you know, being brutally honest, you do have to give it way more time. I don't fully, like, if I'm being very, very honest here, I don't fully know when I'm not thinking about Spekit. Like, I don't get to clock out mentally, which is hard, and so I have to actively work on that. And that's something you have to kind of like push yourself and schedule in. So while like monetarily, like you can drop the startup and bounce back, right? Most people, yeah, I believe, especially in this market that is bonkers, you guys, you can certainly bounce back, but you can't get that time back. So you have to go in there knowing fully well that it might fail, that you are, and that you're prepared to dedicate that time. And that's why everything else that was just talked about is super important. Being passionate about it, feeling that it's important, right? Feeling that you're spending time on something important, because it's not a rational choice, and I would be lying if I sat here and told you guys that there's a way to make it so. It's just, what can you do in order to prove it out, and how long are you going to give yourself? I think that's the other thing, right? Because if it had taken us longer to reach product market fit in the market that we're in, obviously healthcare being its own thing, I don't know if I would have lasted. So there's like the practical realities of having to have a roof over your head. And then for people who have kids, it's another consideration that you have to think about. So I think I was pretty blessed that I didn't have some of those responsibilities to think about. But at the same time, like, life is short, and I encourage everyone to, like, see if they can actually raise enough money or bootstrap enough to be able to start what they want with, and you'd be surprised at the number of people in your network who can at least help you get started on a path, if you, at least from the financial perspective. But the risk is yours. The risk of time is yours to take. You can raise other people's money, but it's your time. So yeah, I think it's worthwhile. I think it's worthwhile because if you truly believe in yourself, and this is why it goes back to Asma and Aziza, it goes back to faith, right? It's like, it's not a rational choice, but you have to believe in yourself, which is why I think this is a great forum for it.
I love that answer. That's great. Aziza, did you have anything else you wanted to add on to that?
I think for me, I was going to do it no matter what. So clearly, for the amount of time that I spent on it, I came out of college 2013. That's when I was determined, and 2016 is when tragedy struck in our family. And since then, I've continued to keep going with it. So giving up was never an option. So nothing else kind of mattered at that point.
Yeah, that's a really great perspective. So I know we're a couple minutes over time. I just wanted to say this is the first MWT event that within the first couple minutes of the event, I had goosebumps just from hearing about things that you amazing women had to share about your journey and what inspired you and what got you to where you are today. It's been incredibly eye-opening for me. Like, I feel like you guys shared some amazing perspectives. So thank you, Zari, Asma, and Aziza for your time. Thank you, Safa, for co-moderating, and Muppies for hosting this with us. And of course, our amazing audience for your great questions and for tuning in on this Thursday evening. I think it's really important to empower the women in your lives, the women in your community. And these women are doing such amazing work. So I feel like if you guys ever see them, like, definitely, or see their work, definitely reshare and support them in whatever way you can. And a plug for MWT, we are trying to get more people to join our board and follow our social medias, just so you're in the know about our events. Everything is always free. So there's a link right there for our LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. So just thank yous from me, and I'll turn it back over to Safa.
Yeah, thanks again, Zahra. I just want to reiterate, thank you for everyone's time, especially our panelists. I know it's hard on a Thursday evening workday, so really appreciate everyone's time. And and hope this was a fruitful discussion for everyone. So thank you for joining. We'll close the conversation soon, but feel free to stay in touch with myself, Zahra, Sadiq from Muppies DC, and we're happy to connect with you all. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
We are a 501c3 organization, have about more than, I would say, around 3,000 members across 33 countries, 13 cities around the globe. And yeah, very much dedicated to advancing Muslim professionals across industries. Personally, I'm from the Muppies DC chapter, so if you want to learn more about us, you can check out our Instagram handle or go to muppies.org, where you can find some great resources about what we do and the different programs we have available for professionals as well as college students. So we have a lot of mentorship opportunities where our professionals will mentor a younger student and help them kind of get into industry. Some programming we've had recently are MBA panels with folks from Sloan, from Harvard, MIT, different business schools. We had a iftar in the National Mall. We had a Creatives Lightning Talk. We had some organizations coming in and talking about Muslims in politics and kind of the role of citizenship. So very much diverse based on the cities we're in. And there's definitely some programming for everyone. And one of our best programs that we've had so far has been the first portion of this Tech Founders panel with record attendance and sentiment. So definitely excited for part 2 here and excited for all the panelists. And I'll hand it over to Safa.